Sagittarius, someone is lying to you. And your spirit has already felt it. The quiet alarm inside you. There is a moment, Sagittarius, when the soul whispers louder than any sound in the room. It does not shout, it does not accuse. It simply presses a gentle hand against your heart and asks you to pay attention. And lately you have felt that hand. You have felt something shifting quietly beneath the surface of your life. Something that refuses to let you rest. Something that keeps tugging at your inner fire, even when you try to brush it aside with logic or hope. You've been caring so much. Caring for a family that leans on you, holding space for aging parents, tending to work, to obligations, to the endless details that keep a household, a life, a world running. And because you are Sagittarius, you take it all on with grit and humor and resilience. You give the best of your flame to everyone who stands near it. You believe in goodness because goodness is your nature. But even the most generous archer feels the tremor of truth before it arrives. And whether you've spoken it aloud or only admitted it to yourself in the quietest hours, something hasn't been right. A sentence that didn't match the tone. A promise that never materialized. A strange feeling in your stomach when someone smiled at you. A moment of hesitation when their story didn't add up. You told yourself you were imagining things. You told yourself you were tired, overwhelmed, stretched between too many responsibilities. You told yourself to give them the benefit of the doubt, because seeing the best in people has always been your default setting, even when it costs you. But intuition, Sagittarius, intuition does not lie. And yours has been ringing like a quiet alarm in the background of your days. This week the veil thins. Jupiter, your ancient guardian, pulls back the curtain you weren't quite ready to open. The truth you sensed, softly, reluctantly, begins to move toward you with unmistakable clarity. And though part of you fears what it might reveal, another part of you, the wiser part, already knows. You are not meant to live inside illusions. You are meant to live inside truth, freedom, and the wide open sky of your own authenticity. You haven't lost your path. You haven't misread the signs. You haven't been dramatic or paranoid or overly sensitive. Your spirit has simply recognized what your mind has tried to deny. And today, as you breathe, as you read these words, a deeper knowing rises in you. A knowing that the time has come to face what has been hidden, not to punish, not to destroy, but to finally free your heart from the weight of pretending not to see. Chapter 1. The truth your heart has been whispering. There is a particular kind of intuition that lives inside a Sagittarius woman in midlife. It is not loud, not dramatic, not intrusive. It is subtle, like the first shift in the wind before a storm. It is quiet, like the way a room feels different when someone enters carrying a truth they are trying to hide. You have felt this intuition for weeks, maybe months, rising gently from the softest corners of your being. Not to frighten you, not to overwhelm you, but to prepare you. It always begins with something small. A strange pause in the middle of a conversation. A smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. A detail in a story that changes depending on the day. A message that takes longer to answer than it should. These tiny irregularities collide softly with your spirit, and even when you try to ignore them, they echo in you like a delicate but persistent bell. And you, Sagittarius, you who are so wise, so perceptive, so finely tuned to the frequencies of honesty, have felt every vibration of that bell. You may have brushed it off because your life is full, overflowing even. You have responsibilities that stretch across generations. Children who still need you. Parents who lean on you. Work that demands your fire. A world that rarely slows down long enough for you to catch your breath. Under so much pressure, it's easy to silence your intuition in the name of harmony. But here is what your soul has been trying to tell you. There is a difference between harmony and self-abandonment. Somewhere along the way, in your desire to keep everything running smoothly, you have been setting aside your own knowing. You have convinced yourself that you were overthinking, that you were being unfair, that you were reading too deeply into things. You have nodded, smiled, reassured, while a soft tension lived quietly behind your ribs. Your intuition, however, has been patient. It has been tapping on the door of your awareness, waiting for the moment when you are ready to listen again. And this week that moment arrives. Because Sagittarius, your intuition is not some mystical concept floating outside of you. It is the wisdom of Jupiter, your ruling planet, moving through your nervous system. It is the lived experience of every heartbreak, every disappointment, every lesson you have survived. It is the ancient knowing in your bones that can sense a lie long before it reaches your ears. You did not imagine the shift. You did not misread the signs. You did not create a problem where there was none. Something inside you recognized a truth that your mind wasn't ready to name yet. And because you have such a generous nature, because you want so deeply to believe the best in people, you allowed doubt to overpower instinct. You told yourself to wait, to be patient, to give this person time, to trust what they showed you instead of what you felt. But the body always knows. The heart always knows. The spirit always knows. That uneasy feeling in your stomach wasn't anxiety. It was clarity trying to break through the fog. That subtle discomfort when their lips formed a perfect explanation wasn't confusion. It was your truth rejecting their distortion. That persistent thought that whispered, "Something is off," wasn't paranoia. It was intuition trying to protect you from a disappointment your mind couldn't accept yet. You didn't fail yourself, Sagittarius. You simply loved with the optimism that has always been your gift. You looked at someone through the lens of who they could be, rather than who they were choosing to be. And while that is a beautiful way to love, it can also blind you to the signs that are right in front of you. But not anymore. Not now. Not in this chapter of your life. The universe does not let a Sagittarius wander in illusions for long. When the truth is ready to be seen, Jupiter steps forward with a gentle but undeniable force, clearing the fog, heightening your senses and illuminating every shadow you've been trying not to examine. This week, the whispers become unmistakable. The patterns you've been ignoring come into focus. The small inconsistencies form a full picture. And the intuition you once silenced becomes your strongest guide, pointing you toward what you already know in the deepest chambers of your being. You are not stepping into chaos. You are stepping into clarity. And clarity, Sagittarius, is the beginning of liberation. When you finally allow yourself to listen, to really truly listen, you will realize that your intuition has never once led you astray. It has only ever asked you to stop diminishing what you feel, because what you feel is sacred. What you sense is truth. And what you are about to discover will validate every inner whisper you have been carrying quietly for far too long. Chapter 2: The Person Behind the Mask. There comes a moment in every Sagittarius woman's life when the truth stops hiding. It steps out from behind familiar faces. It slips through the cracks of polite conversations. It reveals itself in the spaces where someone's words and someone's actions no longer match. And in that moment, you realize something painful but powerful. The person you need to be cautious about is not a stranger. It is rarely the outsider, the distant acquaintance, the subtle background figure who has no real access to your heart. Deception doesn't begin at the edges of your life. It begins close to the center. It begins with the people you trusted enough to let in. And for a Sagittarius woman, warm, open, generous, the center is sometimes too accessible. You allow people to stand near your fire because you see potential where others see limitation, and possibility where others see flaws. But not everyone who stands near your flame knows how to honor it. The person behind the mask, the one whose energy has been unsettling your intuition, is someone who knows your rhythms well. They know when you're tired, when you're distracted, when your guard is lowered because you are so busy caring for everyone else. They know which of your weaknesses are tied to love, and which are tied to responsibility. They know the parts of you that crave connection and the parts that fear abandonment. And they use that knowledge not to support you, but to secure their own position in your life. It may be someone who calls you family, yet speaks differently about you when you are not in the room. Someone who demands trust but gives none in return. Someone who leans on your strength but grows resentful when your strength makes them feel small. It may be a partner whose tenderness feels warmer on some days than others, or a friend who listens closely only to gather information they later twist, or a colleague who praises you in meetings but competes with you in private, playing both sides of the field because they benefit from your brilliance, but fear the day you fully realize it. What makes this person dangerous is not their intelligence or their charm. It is their proximity to your heart. Because Sagittarius, the more deeply someone is woven into your emotional life, the easier it is for them to pull a thread without you noticing. And this person has been pulling threads quietly. Little ones at first, just enough to distort your perception of yourself, just enough to create dependency, just enough to keep you wondering if maybe you've been asking for too much or expecting too highly. But you haven't. You've only been asking for what any soul deserves. Honesty, respect, reciprocity. So why are they lying? Why does someone who receives so much of your warmth still choose deception? The answer is simpler than the pain it causes. They fear losing the version of you they can control. They fear your independence because it exposes the insecurity they carry. They fear your resilience because it highlights their own lack of discipline. They fear your optimism because it shines a light on their darker motives. They fear your freedom because it reminds them of the cages they built for themselves long before you entered the picture. Sagittarius, you have something many people crave but do not know how to hold. You have emotional courage. You face life honestly. You speak your truth even when it trembles. You rise after every fall with a new vision of the future. You don't cling to people from fear. You choose them from love. And this terrifies anyone who would rather tie you down than rise to meet you. They cannot match your spirit, so they try to manage it. They cannot follow your truth, so they distort it. They cannot walk beside your freedom, so they hide the parts of themselves that would reveal their true intentions. In this chapter, the universe asks you to see them clearly. Not with anger, but with awareness. Awareness is not punishment. It is protection. When you finally see the truth of who someone is, you are no longer trapped by who you hoped they could be. You stop romanticizing their potential and begin acknowledging their reality. And their reality is this. They are not afraid of losing you. They are afraid of losing their access to your energy, your loyalty, your generosity, your guidance, your light. They are afraid that once you see them without the mask, you will no longer tolerate their half-truths. And they are right. Because a Sagittarius who sees the truth becomes unstoppable. A Sagittarius who sees the truth becomes sovereign again. What you feel rising inside you, the discomfort, the suspicion, the clarity, is not an ending. It is an unveiling. It is the moment you stop looking at the mask and start looking at the soul behind it. And once that happens, you cannot unsee it. Soon the veil will fall completely. And when it does, you will finally understand why your intuition has been restless. The person you trusted was not being honest, not because you are naive, but because they assumed you would never look closely enough to notice. But Sagittarius, you see everything now. You feel everything now. And the truth, once revealed, becomes the doorway to your liberation. Chapter 3, The Breaking Point and the Pain of Realization. There is a moment, Sagittarius, when the truth no longer hides in whispers or subtle signs. It appears suddenly, unmistakably, like a light turned on in a dark room. And when that light comes, it does not ask whether you are ready. It simply illuminates what your soul has sensed all along. The revelation may arrive quietly, through a sentence spoken by someone who didn't know you were listening, or through a message you weren't meant to see. It may slip out through a careless inconsistency, a detail that contradicts a previous story, or it may arrive as a sudden clarity, an inner jolt that stops you mid-thought and tells you without hesitation, this is the truth. Whatever the form, the moment is unmistakable. The mask falls. The illusion shatters. The softness of doubt becomes the sharpness of certainty. And in that instant, a world inside you shifts. Your first reaction is not anger. It is disbelief. A soft, stunned sort of silence that fills your chest. You replay conversations, you revisit small moments, you connect threads you once ignored. You begin to see how every piece fits, how every doubt pointed to this, how your intuition had been gently guiding you toward this understanding long before you were willing to hear it. The truth hurts not because it is surprising, but because it confirms what you hoped wasn't real. Then the weight comes. The heaviness of betrayal settles into your bones. A sadness rises from a place deeper than disappointment. It isn't just that someone lied. It's that you let yourself believe them. You trusted their words, their closeness, their promises. You defended them in conversations where your heart fought for their integrity. You gave them the benefit of every doubt because that is who you are. Someone who loves generously, who forgives easily, who sees the best in others even when they show their worst. And now you stand at the intersection of truth and pain, feeling the ache of realizing that your kindness was met with someone else's convenience. There is a specific heartbreak reserved for Sagittarius women in midlife. The heartbreak of seeing clearly for the first time after years of carrying the emotional weight of others. When you have long been the strong one, the steady one, the one who makes things work, the one who offers understanding long before it is earned, betrayal doesn't feel like a personal failure. It feels like an exhaustion of the soul. You wonder how you didn't see sooner. You wonder if you ignored too much. You wonder if you made excuses for behavior that didn't deserve your patience. But Sagittarius, the truth is simpler and far kinder. You weren't blind. You were loving. You weren't naive. You were hopeful. You weren't weak. You were loyal. The pain you feel now is not proof that you were wrong. It is proof that you cared. And caring is never a mistake. Yet the pain still comes. It comes in waves: anger, sadness, confusion, grief. Anger at their dishonesty. Sadness for the version of the relationship you believed in. Confusion about what was real and what wasn't. Grief for the trust that will never return in the same form. These emotions rise not because you are breaking, but because you are awakening. They are not signs of defeat, but signs of release. Every tear, every tremor, every moment of heaviness is the soul exhaling what it can no longer hold. And beneath all these emotions, something even deeper is unfolding. You begin to see that the real pain is not about losing this person. It is about losing the illusion you built around them. It is the shock of realizing that you loved a version of someone that never truly existed. And though that realization hurts, it also liberates you from the fantasy that kept you tied to them. This breaking point is not a collapse. It is a cracking open. A sacred opening that lets the truth in. A moment where Jupiter places a hand on your shoulder and whispers, "Now you see. Now you understand. Now you are free to choose differently." But before that freedom comes, you must honor the pain. Not rush it, not deny it, not mask it with premature forgiveness or forced strength. Your grief is holy. It deserves space. It deserves breath. It deserves the gentleness you so easily give to others but often withhold from yourself. So breathe, Sagittarius. Breathe through the sting of the truth. Breathe through the ache of disappointment. Breathe through the unraveling of the illusion. Because every breath brings you closer to clarity. Every tear brings you closer to liberation. Every tremor brings you closer to yourself. And when the storm inside finally settles, you will rise, not as the version of yourself who feared the truth, but as the woman who survived it. A woman who now knows that she can lose a lie and still keep her soul intact. A woman who realizes that the painful truth is far kinder than the comforting illusion that once kept her small. This is not the end of your story. It is the end of the chapter where you dimmed your intuition to protect someone else's comfort. And as this chapter closes, a new one, brighter, bolder, and infinitely freer, begins to open before you. Chapter 4, Your Jupiter-lit Liberation. Reclaiming your freedom. There is a moment, Sagittarius, when the pain begins to loosen its grip. Not because the situation has changed, not because someone apologized, not because the story resolved neatly, but because your spirit remembers who you truly are. It is subtle at first, like a soft warmth returning to frozen places inside you. But then it grows, it strengthens, it spreads through your chest like a slow, steady sunrise. This is the moment Jupiter steps forward, illuminating everything that had been dimmed by disappointment. Jupiter, your ruling planet, does not bring truth to break you. It brings truth to free you. And when the truth reveals itself, raw, undeniable, you stop clinging to the version of life that was built on someone else's deception. For the first time in a long time, you see the landscape of your life without the fog of false promises. You see the patterns. You see the cycles. You see where you have been giving too much, forgiving too quickly, shrinking too easily. And with that clarity comes a fire you had forgotten, the fire of your sovereignty. You begin to realize that the betrayal was not the punishment. Staying blind to it was. The lie was not the end of the road. Continuing to tolerate it would have been. And suddenly the pain becomes something else, fuel. It becomes the ignition point of your rebirth. It becomes the moment your spirit decides, with a quiet but immovable knowing. No more. This is the power of Sagittarius. You do not stay broken. You expand. You rise. You learn. You liberate yourself from anything that attempts to control or confine your spirit. And in this chapter of your life, this midlife resurgence where wisdom and courage meet, you reclaim something you didn't even realize you had given away. The right to live on your own terms. Liberation does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it begins with the smallest act. Choosing silence instead of explanation, stepping back instead of stepping in, refusing to clean up someone else's emotional mess, or saying a simple but sacred word, enough. And with every boundary you set, with every truth you honor, you feel a growing spaciousness inside your chest. You feel the return of your inner compass, the one that always pointed toward freedom, long before anyone tried to dull its magnetism. You realize you no longer need to prove your loyalty to people who do not value it. You no longer need to keep peace at the cost of your inner stability. You no longer need to carry relationships that only thrive when you are the one doing all the emotional labor. You no longer need to stay small so that someone else can feel tall. These are not losses. These are liberations, quiet doorways back to yourself. And as you begin reclaiming your energy, something beautiful happens. You stop feeling afraid of being alone. You stop fearing the quiet. You stop mistaking solitude for emptiness. Instead, you feel a renewed sense of spaciousness, a sacred permission to breathe without explanation. You realize that solitude is not the absence of love. It is the foundation of self-respect. And from that foundation, healthier connections can finally take root. Jupiter reminds you that your life expands when you stop trying to hold together what was never meant to last. Your path becomes clearer when you stop bending your truth to fit someone else's comfort. Your future opens when you stop protecting people who do not protect your heart in return. And as you release the weight of deception, you step into something far more powerful. The possibility of a life guided entirely by truth. In this stage of your journey, the one marked by midlife wisdom and spiritual maturity, you no longer seek love that limits you. You no longer tolerate loyalty that is conditional. You no longer accept connections that dim your fire. Instead, you want what resonates with your soul, not what entertains your fears. You want depth, honesty, reciprocity. You want relationships where you can breathe, stretch, grow, and dream. And the universe is ready to deliver these things once you create space for them. As you reclaim your freedom, a new image of yourself begins to take shape, stronger, wiser, more self-assured. Not because you were rescued, but because you rescued yourself. Not because the truth was gentle, but because you faced it with courage. Not because life became easier, but because you chose yourself over illusions. This is the essence of Sagittarius rebirth. Rising from truth, not from fantasy. You begin to notice that your energy shifts. Your inner flame brightens. Your posture becomes more rooted. Your voice becomes clearer. You no longer apologize for your needs. You no longer dim your insights. You no longer second-guess your intuition. You become the archer again, steady, focused, aligned with a target that is finally worthy of your aim. And with this liberation comes a soft, almost sacred peace. A peace that grows from knowing that you have survived what once frightened you. A peace that blooms because you are no longer carrying the weight of someone else's secrets. A peace that whispers to you, gently but unmistakably, you are free now. Your freedom is not loud. It is not chaotic. It is not fueled by revenge or bitterness. It is quiet, slow, radiant, like a flame that cannot be extinguished because it burns from your deepest truth. And as you stand in this new clarity, Jupiter places a guiding light before you, showing you the path you were meant to walk all along. The path of your own liberation. This is the chapter where you stop shrinking. This is the chapter where you stop doubting. This is the chapter where you return to yourself. And Sagittarius, there is no freedom more powerful than that. Conclusion. Stepping into the truth, stepping into yourself. There is a tenderness that arrives after the storm, Sagittarius. It doesn't come quickly, and it doesn't come loudly. It comes in a soft, almost imperceptible way. As if the universe is exhaling with you, releasing everything you've been holding inside. After the truth has broken open the places where illusions once lived, there is finally enough space for your spirit to breathe again. And in that breath, something extraordinary happens. You return to yourself. You begin to sense that what felt like an ending was, in truth, a return. The return of your voice, your boundaries, your instinct, your vision. The return of the woman you were before life asked you to carry so much for others. The return of the fire you once dimmed to keep the peace. The return of your inner compass, restored after too many seasons of doubt. And as this return unfolds, you realize that the truth didn't come to break you. It came to free you from the weight of what was never meant to be yours. The lies you uncovered, the deception you felt, the mask that fell. They were not evidence of your failure. They were evidence of your awakening. They were evidence that your soul refused to stay asleep in a space where dishonesty was normalized. They were evidence that Jupiter, your cosmic guardian, is fiercely protective of your evolution. This week did not tear your life apart. It tore the veil apart. And now, with the illusion gone, You can finally see the landscape of your relationships with clarity and compassion. You see who walked with you out of love, and who stayed near you out of convenience. You see who valued your strength, and who fed quietly on your generosity. You see who stood with you in truth, and who only stood with you when it benefited them. And this clarity, even though it came wrapped in pain, is the greatest gift you could have received. Because now you are free to choose differently. You no longer accept connections that drain you. You no longer tolerate loyalty that comes with conditions. You no longer sacrifice your inner peace for someone who treats it carelessly. You no longer dim your fire to make others comfortable. Instead, you step toward a life that honors the fullness of your spirit. A life aligned with your truth, your intuition, your boundaries, your wisdom. Wisdom shaped not by perfection, but by everything you have survived. A life where you no longer apologize for wanting honesty, where you no longer question your instincts, where you no longer settle for less than what your soul deserves. And as you stand here, on the threshold of truth and rebirth, you can feel your heart shifting. The pain that once consumed you softens. The confusion clears. The anger dissolves into understanding. The grief melts into gratitude. Gratitude not for the betrayal itself, but for the clarity that followed. Gratitude for the strength you discovered within yourself. Gratitude for the courage it took to face what you feared. Gratitude for the new chapter unfolding because you chose truth over comfort. Sagittarius, you are not losing anyone. You are retrieving yourself. You are gathering the pieces of your spirit that you once scattered in the name of love and responsibility. You are calling back your power, your light, your sovereignty. And the universe is responding. In your willingness to see the truth, in your courage to honor it. You open a new path, one lit by Jupiter, one aligned with freedom, one guided by integrity and radiant self-respect. The woman emerging from this week is not the woman who entered it. She is wiser, clearer, stronger, more attuned to the sacred language of her intuition. She is no longer willing to settle for half-truths, for lukewarm loyalty, for love that shrinks her spirit. She is ready to rise, ready to walk forward, ready to choose herself over anyone who demands she dim her light. And as you step into this next chapter, with your heart healed by truth and your spirit anchored in freedom, remember this. The truth did not break you. It restored you. It returned you. It reawakened the fire that was always yours. Sagittarius, lift your gaze. Your new beginning has already begun.